in this lesson is we're going to actually just look at listening part A. We're going to do a short task and we're going to then look at some vocabulary as well. So listening part A, let's have a quick look at this. Whoops, if we go back, excuse me. Okay, so listening part A. A lot of you will know this already, so won't spend too much time really looking at the format of the exam, but it's a consultation. It could be a doctor and patient, it could be, really it could be anyone. It might be a dermatologist with a patient, it could be a nurse, it could be a neurologist, but you've got a medical professional and a patient, and it's usually the beginning of a consultation. There are two different extracts, and what you're doing is you're doing a gap fill exercise and you're listening for specific information. So we'll have a closer look at this a bit later on. Going to do a little bit of maths. I don't like maths, but this isn't too complicated. There are two extracts and each extract has 12 marks. So that's 24 marks for part A. Part B and part C are made up of 18 marks. In total, that gives you 42 marks. So what that means, and the reason why I'm doing this is because when you look at part A, it's more than 50% of your listening paper. So it's really, really important because listening, as with reading, is really, it's 1 mark per question. Now, part C in both listening and reading is generally more difficult, but you don't get more marks for the questions. Like I said, it's 1 question, 1 mark. So often what we do here, we often aim to get top marks in part A. We try to get as maximum marks or as high as we can in part A, because the way the course is designed, both listening and reading, is that part B is slightly more difficult than part A and part C is slightly more difficult than part B. So it kind of gets harder as you go along. So with part A, we always try to aim for maximum marks or top marks. And that can take the pressure off you a little bit when you get to part C. Okay, this is what you see on test day. You're going to see something like this. At the top, it tells you, it gives you a bit of context, tells you who you're listening to. So it's always useful to read the top, read the context. Here we've got a pulmonologist talking to a patient called Robert Miller. So you know you're listening to something related to the lungs, and just gives you a little bit of context. Now you've got headings on the left of your paper, and these can be really useful. You'll see what I mean here. You can see on the left there are headings. It says patient, symptoms, background details, medical history. So it's just useful to kind of pay attention to these headings as you listen, because they kind of give you a little bit of context. Where it says symptoms, you know that's what you're listening to. The patient and the medical professional will be talking about symptoms. Once they move on, and as you can see medical history, that's what they're talking about. And that can really help you. It gives you context, but it can also kind of help you anticipate some of the answers. That's what we're going to look at as well. But before we do, you'll notice here there are also some notes which are completed. So not every note is a gap fill. Some of them have been completed, and this has been done intentionally really to help you and to guide you through the paper. You've got to remember with listening parts, in fact all parts, part A, B and C, you only get 1 opportunity to listen. So it's really important you don't stop listening, and it's really important you stay focused on your listening. Even if you miss a question, don't worry about it, let it go, but don't stop listening. If you lose the listening, it's really hard to pick it up again. So just stay focused and just keep listening. And you've got these notes here to help you, these completed notes. You can see at the top here it says tiredness. When the patient is talking about fatigue or how tired they feel, you know where you are. Again, they'll be talking about shortness of breath, or SOB it says here. So when they talk about being out of breath, you know where you are on the paper. If you look after question 6, you can see here it says no longer able to play golf. Once they're talking about golf, again, it's just guiding you through the paper. So use these completed notes to help you, because that's what they're there for. Okay, and synonyms and synonymous language. This is quite important. You're listening to a patient speaking, and the patient has no real medical knowledge, and they're not really going to be using medical language. So the language you see on your test paper, the consultation, is a little bit more formal, and the patient will be using more informal language. So what you can see is different from what you can hear, in fact. For example, this is what it says on the test paper. You can see question number 2, it says weight loss described as something in nature. Now, the patient isn't going to say those exact words. The patient isn't going to say something like, I would describe my weight loss as da-da in nature. They're going to say something different. So that's just something you need to be aware of. Actually, this is what the patient says. The patient says, I've lost quite a bit of weight too. I mean, I didn't notice at first because it was very, I've taken out the answer because we're going to do this listening. Okay, you can see there it's different, and you can see the language from the patient is a little bit more informal. I've lost quite a bit of weight. I mean, and then the patient says cause as well. The language is just kind of more real English, if you like, just spoken kind of everyday English. So it's something to be aware of. Your medical notes are a little bit more formal, and you're listening out for synonyms, which are often more informal. Here's another example. In your notes, it says previously employed as. Again, the patient isn't going to say, I was previously employed as. It's never that simple. In fact, this is what they say. Well, till recently, I worked as a... Okay, so you can see it's slightly different. And in fact, it's a little bit more simple and straightforward from the audio. Okay, so it's good to be aware of these kind of synonyms or synonymous language. And paying attention to these words before the gap and after the gap can really help you. And that's what we're going to look at now, because you've got 30 seconds to anticipate answers. It's very difficult to predict answers because you could have many different answers, but you can anticipate what kind of answer is coming. For example, let's have a look here. At the top, it tells you you've got 30 seconds to look at the notes. I'm just going to zoom in here. These are the first set of notes. You've got the patient, Robert Miller. Then it says symptoms. So we're going to use the symptoms to help us because that's giving us context. And with the symptoms, you can see with question number 1, the words before and after the gap can really help you. It says persistent something cough. Remember to be aware of synonyms. The patient might not use the word persistent. They might use another word. So remember you're listening out for a synonym. And think about what kind of word would go with a cough. You can see here it's an adjective. Now, that's what I mean. It's difficult to predict the answer because there's different types of cough, but really you're anticipating that an adjective is going to come. And that's really what you're listening out for, a word that goes with cough. It's really worth learning collocations, I think, with listening part A. In fact, as you prepare for the OET, you really want to build up your vocabulary. The more language you have, the more it can really help you. And you have to remember this is a language test. It's not a medical test. So vocabulary is really important, and as you prepare, it's really nice if you could actually just build up language. And collocations are a nice way to learn vocabulary. With listening part A, sometimes I've seen questions with cough, and you can see there are different ways of describing cough. You can have a smoker's cough, a dry cough. We've got persistent or a chesty cough. With pain, again, there's lots of collocations, lots of words that collocate, that go with pain. And again, this could kind of help you. And it's just a nice way of learning language as well. Another common collocation I've seen in listening part A, sensation, different adjectives that go with sensation, a bloating sensation from your stomach, a numbing sensation, burning and tingling. So again, it's just a nice way to learn language, and this could really help you in part A, but it could really help you, in fact, in the whole OET exam, just by building up your vocabulary. Okay, let's go back to the listening paper. So we've got, we know number one, it's an adjective that goes with cough. Number two, again, looking at the word before the gap, it says weight loss described as something in nature. So a word to describe weight loss, again, this is just an adjective. We know it could be different answers, but we're listening out for an adjective. Fingertips appear, okay, and once again, it's another adjective. Same with number four, nails feel relatively. Again, you could have different answers, but we know we're listening out for an adjective. Lots of adjectives there in the first part of this listening paper. Let's keep working. The second heading says background details. So now we know the patient's just going to be talking about their background. Previously employed as a, well, again, I mean, it could really be anything. It's hard to predict this because there could be any kind of job. But that's what you're listening for. You're listening out for a job. The words in brackets can help you as well. This says 20 years. It could be important as well. So really pay attention, like I said, to words both before and after the gap. Question number 6, now employed as. You've really got to read the questions carefully. Number 5 is previously employed. 6, now employed. And they might talk about 2 or 3 jobs or 4 jobs just to confuse you, but really focus on those words previously and now. But question number 6, just like number 5, we know it's a type of job. Okay, the patient will talk about golf and pigeons, and then we can move on to the next section. This is about medical history. With medical history, they're going to be talking about hypertension. You can see current prescription of, again, it's really difficult to predict the answer, but we know, well, it's going to be a medication. So we're listening out for a noun. It might be related to hypertension, but there's lots of different medications, I guess, for hypertension. But we know it's going to be a noun, it's going to be a medication. Number 8, sounds in chest, reported by GP. Okay, this time it's an adjective, a word to describe something you hear in the chest, a noise that a doctor would hear. So again, it could be anything. So we know we're listening for an adjective. Father suffered from, well, again, it could really be anything, but we're listening for a condition and a noun. Okay, as we keep going on, then we're going to listen to something about previous tests. Again, it could really be anything. There's so many different types of tests, but we know it's going to be possibly a type of test. It's a noun. And again, thinking about the grammar with 11, it's going to be a noun. It's going to be a type of test. Number 12, prescription of. So we're listening out for some type of medication as well. Okay, I mean, you've got 30 seconds to do that. I mean, we've spent 2 minutes doing that. So 30 seconds isn't a lot of time, but with practice, you will get quicker. And as with so much of the OET exam, It's really about timing. So with practice, you will get faster and faster, but try to use these 30 seconds. They give you these 30 seconds for a reason, and do as much as you can as you go through the paper. Okay, so let's do it then. This is extract 1. You'll see half the paper and the audio will play, and then it will automatically change onto the second half of the paper. Okay, as we've been through this paper, we won't spend too long on it. We know here it says you hear a pulmonologist talking to a patient called Robert Miller. For questions 1 to 12, complete the notes with a word or short phrase. I should just say as well, if you don't spell a word correctly, you can still get the mark as long as you still spell it phonetically correct. So for example, if a word has a double L and you only write one L, well, that doesn't change the pronunciation of the word, so you might still get the mark. So remember, it's a listening test, it's not a spelling test. And if you don't know a word, don't panic, just write down what you can hear. Okay, guys, so we're going to do this. Just give you a few seconds to quickly look through the paper. We've already looked through this, so I won't spend too long on it. And I'm going to play the audio. Okay, good luck.
Good morning, Mr. Miller. Now, looking at your notes, I see you've been having a few problems recently. Could you tell me a little about what's been happening in your own words?
Well, yeah, it's a combination of things, really. To kick off, I feel pretty tired most of the time. Just haven't got the energy I used to have.
Right.
And I've got this cough. It's there all the time, and it feels dry. I mean, I'm not coughing up phlegm or blood or anything like that. But the worst thing, which really bothers me, is that I'm so short of breath. Even if I'm just getting dressed in the morning or going up a few steps, I have to stop because I get breathless so quickly. And I've lost quite a bit of weight too. I mean, I didn't notice at first because it was very gradual, but all in all, I'm about 10 kilos lighter than I was 6 months ago.
Right.
I've not been dieting or anything. I love my food.
Okay. And, well, have you noticed anything else?
Yeah, just take a look at my fingers. The tips look swollen, don't they? And it's the same with my toes, which are bulging out at the end, too. It's weird. And my nails, I don't understand it. They've become soft. They're not hard like they used to be. Look.
Okay, I see what you mean. And tell me a little about yourself. What you do for a living?
Well, till recently, I worked as a farm laborer. Did it for about 20 years in total. It was hard, physical graft, and it finally got to the stage where I just couldn't cope with it anymore.
Right.
It really took it out of me. So this last couple of years, I've been a security guard, working nights at a local DIY warehouse. It's a bit boring, and the late shifts took a bit of getting used to, but it's okay.
And are you finding it less physically demanding?
That's right. I just haven't got the stamina now for anything else. In fact, I've even had to give up my golf. Can't manage it anymore. Any spare time now goes on looking after my pigeons. I've done that since I was a teenager.
Very nice. And what about your medical history? Now, I see you were diagnosed with hypertension last year, and you're taking beta blockers at the moment for that.
That's right. My GP said it'd help. Something the GP also said when I saw him about my breathing problems was that he heard what he called crackling noises in my chest.
Okay.
I can't hear them, but he could through the stethoscope.
Okay. And is there any family history of breathing or lung problems or any serious illnesses that you know of?
I don't think so. My mother was always healthy, but my dad developed bad eczema as an adult. I remember the red patches on his hands and face, but he didn't have any lung problems as far as I know.
Right. And, well, looking at your previous tests, you were diagnosed with hypertension about 6 months ago. You had...
Oh, yeah, an echocardiogram, to check my heart.
Yes.
And a chest x-ray about 4 weeks ago after I saw my GP. that came back okay, as far as I know.
I see.
I'm not keen on hospitals, to be honest. Am I going to need to have lots more tests?
Well, I'm going to suggest you have what's called an arterial blood gas test. This will let us check how well your lungs are working, how they move oxygen into your blood and remove carbon dioxide from it.
Okay.
And I'm also going to order a CT scan. Now, this will be more revealing than the chest x-ray you had. And I may then prescribe a course of corticosteroids. This will depend on what the tests show up. Now, I'd start you on a relatively low dose, and then we'll see how.
Okay. So let's see how you got on, and feel free to type in any answers into the chat or any questions you have. So first of all, let's have a look. So this was the first section that that we were listening to. The patient was talking about their symptoms. Now we had to find an adjective that collocates with cough. And as you read through this, you'll probably see here, you can see the word cough. And that's a big clue. You can see the synonym as well. The patient didn't use the word persistent, basically said it's there all the time. So you can see how the language is different from the audio to your question paper. The answer here, you can see the adjective dry, a dry cough. Okay, some interesting language as well, just to kind of highlight some language. Here it says to kick off, and you can kind of see actually how informal this language is. And in some ways with part A, with listening, you're being tested on quite informal language. To kick off, in fact, it's kind of the complete opposite from your writing. When you're writing a letter, it's got to be professional and formal, but here we've got it's almost like an idiom. It's very colloquial. To kick off, I mean, it's a sporting term, isn't it? I think it's from football. It's a footballing term. When you start a football game, you kick off. So what the patient is just saying is to begin with. But interesting language, and that's kind of the language which can help you. Okay, so let's keep going. This is question number 2. Weight loss described as, well, we were looking for an adjective that goes with weight loss. Again, you can see here we've got the tape script. The patient didn't say SOB. The patient said, I'm so short of breath. So it's just guiding you down the listening. You hear that and you know the answer is soon coming for number 2. I've lost quite a bit of weight, the patient says. It was very gradual, and that was the adjective that we needed, gradual. It was gradual in nature. Okay, if we can go on to number 3. Again, it was another adjective, fingertips. We were listening out for, well, the patient didn't say fingertips, they said fingers. Then he said, my tips, the tips look swollen. And that was the adjective there. And you can see the synonym with appear and look, similar words. And you know the answer is coming, it was swollen. With number 4, again, once you hear the word nails, you know the answer is coming. You hear that word nails. They've become soft, the patient says, and that was the adjective you needed, soft. Okay, with number 5, we were listening out for a job. The patient basically just used the past simple. I worked as a farm labourer, and that's what you needed, a farm labourer. It was important you wrote farm. I think if you wrote labourer, then I'm not sure if you'd get the mark because it sounds like a different job. Labouring could really be anywhere, but a farm labourer is quite specific to working on a farm. So I think you'd need both those words. I did it for about 20 years, so it's just guiding you through. And then the patient says, this last couple of years, I've been a security guard. And that's what you needed for number 6. Again, just want to highlight some language. It's quite interesting. We've got hard physical graft. It's quite an informal way of just saying hard work, but again, quite informal language. So hard physical graft, meaning hard work. Also, it took it out of me. Another quite informal expression saying I was really exhausted, I was really tired, I was fatigued, but just informal. Shifts took a bit of getting used to. Again, it's quite informal as well. Something takes a bit of getting used to. It means it takes some time to become familiar with something. But you can just see by looking at the language how how informal this language is. And a lot of it isn't medical as well. It is just almost everyday spoken English. Okay, number 5, number 6. If we go on to number 7, the patient was talking about medical history, current prescription of, they talked about hypertension, and this came from the pulmonologist. So most of the answers often come from the patient, but you do have to listen to both the patient and the doctor or the nurse or the medical professional. This was actually from the pulmonologist, and she said, you're taking beta blockers at the moment, and that was your answer. So we've got beta blockers for number 7. Again, some synonyms, current on your question paper and in the audio at the moment. Number 8, we were looking for a word that goes with sounds, chest sounds. You can see here in the tape script reported by the GP. Noises, the synonym, noises and sounds, and then just before that, crackling noises. So that was the word you needed, crackling. Number 9, we needed an illness. Let's see, you can see the synonym. It's just the same meaning, but it's expressed in a different way. Father suffered from, dad developed. Exactly the same thing, but just expressed in a different way. The answer was eczema. You didn't need the word bad, but if you wrote the word bad, you would still have got the mark. It's fine. And a tricky word to spell as well, eczema. And like I said, if you didn't get the spelling perfect, as long as you've spelt it phonetically, then you would still get the mark. Okay, eczema was number 9. If we move on to number 10, and we were listing out for tests now, some kind of test 6 months ago. You can hear 6 months ago, and the patient had an echocardiogram. So that was number 10. Chest x-ray 1 month. You can see the patient talks about chest x-ray about 4 weeks ago. Again, a kind of synonym in your audio, on your question paper, it says 1 month ago. In the audio, it says 4 weeks ago. Same thing, just expressed differently, but they're guiding you down the paper, guiding you on to number 11. Again, future actions now, but we need a word that goes with tests. And you can hear this word. As soon as you hear that word, your ears stand up and you know the answer is coming. Arterial blood gas. I think if you had written ABG, it probably would be acceptable because it's quite a common, an acronym, if you like, in medical terms. So possibly ABG would have been accepted. An arterial blood gas. Talked about a CT scan. So again, it was just guiding you down. And then number 12, prescription of, and the doctor said, prescribe a course of, expressed slightly different, but corticosteroids. Again, tricky word to spell, but if you have spelt it phonetically, you would still get the mark. Okay, so how did you do with that overall? I'm sure most of you have done quite well. What we're going to do, we're going to move on to extract 2. So this time you're going to have 15 seconds to look at half the paper, then another 15 seconds to look at the second half of the paper. Remember what we spoke about earlier. Use the headings on the left to help you, give you context, and try to anticipate as many answers as you can. You've got to be really fast. Think about the grammar. Are you listening out for an adjective? Is it a noun? Is it a type of test? Is it an illness? Is it a medication? But you've just got to be really, really fast. So this is what we're going to listen to. You're listening to an eye specialist talking to a patient called Jasmine Burton, who has recently undergone eye surgery. Okay, so this is great for ophthalmologists. And for questions 13 to 24, complete the notes with a word or short phrase. You now have 30 seconds to look at the notes. Okay.
I've got your notes here, Mrs. Burton, but as we're meeting for the first time, could you begin by telling me a little about your eyesight and the treatment you've had over the years? Did you wear glasses as a child, for example?
Yes, since I was about 7. My parents were concerned by the way I held a book when I was reading, so they took me to an optometrist. He told them I had some kind of astigmatism.
Am I right in assuming that's myopic rather than hyperopic?
Well, yes, I'm nearsighted, if that's what you mean.
That's right. Some people actually have mixed astigmatism. They're farsighted in one eye and near in the other.
Oh, well, that's not me.
Right.
And as well as my astigmatism, as you probably noticed, my eyes flicker. I'm not aware of it myself, but other people comment on it sometimes. I think you call it nystagmus. It meant that when I had my eye surgery, they preferred to use a general rather than a local anaesthetic.
Okay, so did anyone ever tell you what they thought might have caused the condition?
Well, I was once told that my generally poor eyesight is most probably down to the fact that I don't have enough pigment in my eye.
Right.
On the whole, my eyes have never really caused me any significant difficulties, however. I've always had to wear glasses, so that's part of life now. I suppose the only thing is that driving's always been out of the question. I'd never have passed the sight part of the test. That's probably a good thing because it takes me some time to focus, which could make me pretty dangerous if I was ever behind the wheel of a car.
Yes, indeed.
Also, I'm useless at sports like tennis. I think that's because I'm poor at judging the distance between myself and the ball. That was a pain as a teenager, but I've never particularly wanted to play since then. And I've hardly had any issues at work because of my sight. I'm a receptionist in a hotel, and I've never had any difficulty reading computer screens or anything, fortunately.
You've had your eyes regularly checked throughout your life, presumably.
Yeah, that's right. Every couple of years. My prescription has changed a little over time, but not that much. Though I certainly couldn't manage without reading glasses these days. About 3 years ago, I was told a cataract was developing in my right eye.
Right.
It was a few years before they decided to remove it. That was this February, and it all went very smoothly.
Good. And you were pleased with the result?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, thrilled. If only all our failing parts could be replaced so easily. However, when I had the routine checkup a couple of weeks after the operation, I was told there was some clouding.
Opacity, yeah.
I think was the word they used, in the capsule containing the new lens. It's a bit disappointing. They could clear it with a laser if it gets to be a real problem, but my flicker makes that rather a risky option. I knew that there's a greater chance of developing a detached retina after a cataract op.
Yes.
But I'm glad to say they found there wasn't any evidence of that in my case.
Oh, good.
All they did was make an appointment for me to be checked out again in 6 months' time. But they said I should get in touch if I felt concerned about my eyes.
And is that what brings you here today?
Yeah, because I am bothered about a couple of things. So firstly, I've noticed more floaters than usual.
Right.
I don't know if that's something to worry about or not. More annoying is the fact that I'm much more troubled by glare than I used to be. So I wanted to ask your opinion on that.
Okay, well, let's start.
Okay, so how did you get on with with that. Again, feel free to type in any questions into the chat or your answers into the chat. I think that was a little bit more difficult than the first extract, so I'm not sure how you felt about it. But let's have a look at the answers, and we've got the tape script here to help us. So first of all, the patient was talking about their history of their eye, and number 13 suffers from, well, it's going to be a type of illness or some kind of disease, possibly related, of course, to the eye. Astigmatism, the word after the gap could help you, and once you hear that word, you know the answer is coming. The word here, it's interesting, actually they would have accepted two answers. You could say myopic, that was one answer, or actually you could use the non-medical word nearsighted. They actually mean the same kind of thing. So both of those answers would have been accepted. As I checked the answer key as well, they also would have accepted short-sighted as well, even though the patient didn't actually say that, but it has the same kind of meaning as nearsighted. So any one of those three answers would have been accepted. With number 14 as well, you can see here the synonym also, as well as, you know, the listening has moved on. You know we've moved on from question 13, and the answer is going to come for question number 14. And again, I think this was a little bit tricky because there were two possible answers. The patient said a flicker. Nystagmus is kind of the medical term as well. So you could have used the medical term. The patient said that as well. But flicker would have been fine. Or you could have said flickering. So again, there are three possible options. I always just find it safer to write down whatever I hear. So I would have written a flicker. But it wouldn't have been wrong to have written the medical word here, nystagmus, particularly as the patient did actually say that. Okay, so a couple of tricky words there. And then number 15, eye problems. You can see the synonym, poor eyesight, may result from, down to. Okay, it's an interesting synonym. And again, you can see how the language from the patient is just so much more informal than your paper. So you're listening out for these synonyms when the patient says down to, and then you've got a lack of, I don't have enough, it's exactly the same meaning, and you know the answer is coming. And it's, I don't have enough pigment in the eye. So really you just needed the word pigment, that would have been fine. If you wrote pigment in the eye, that would have been acceptable as well. It moves on, number 16, isn't an option. And if you look at the tape script here, you might be able to see something at the end. You can see the synonym, it's out of the question, it isn't an option. Again, you can see, you can hear the difference in formality. So something out of the question, it isn't possible, it's not an option. And the patient, she said, driving's always been out of the question. And that was the answer for number 16. Number 17, report some slowness to. Okay, so the word for slowness, it takes me some time. Again, very similar, but expressed in a different way. It takes me some time to focus. And we know it's going to be a verb as well. After to, you often have the infinitive verb. So you're listening for a verb. And focus was the answer. Number 18, let's see, poor perception of. This is quite difficult. Well, the patient said, I'm poor at judging the distance between myself and the board. And the answer, in fact, was distances as well. Poor perception of distances. I'm poor at judging the distance. A little bit tricky, and you really had to just listen carefully as well and use those words before the gap to help you, to really help you focus on your listening. And number 19, okay, it's going to be a job, works as, it was a receptionist. We move on. And again, the completed gaps, remember these are guiding you down in the listening. I have no issues at work. I've never had any difficulty, the patient says. We can just follow it down. We get to surgery. The patient's now talking about their surgery, something in the right eye. First noted 3 years ago. I'll just get the tape script. About 3 years ago. So as soon as you hear that, about 3 years ago, your ears stand up and you know the answer is coming. About 3 years ago, I was told a cataract was developing. So again, I noticed and something was developing. It's slightly different. So you just need to be aware of this synonymous language. But the words after the gap really helped you here 3 years ago. So we had cataract. We move on, number 21, some capsular. Post-operatively, you can see the synonym after the operation, post-operatively. So again, you know the answer is coming when you hear this. I was told there was some clouding, okay, or opacity. Same kind of word, actually, clouding, opacity. The patient means the same thing. So either word would have been accepted. Number 22, the examination showed no sign of well, it's going to be a noun. That's really all we know. Could be anything, but we're talking about the eye and it was surgery. And you can see here, no sign of, there wasn't any evidence. Again, it's a similar kind of expression, just slightly different. A detached retina was the answer. Okay, if we move on to 23, now the patient started talking about the presenting complaints, the main complaint, their main problem. Reported increase in number. If we move on here. Yeah, I've noticed more floaters than usual. So more floaters, there's been an increase. And that was the answer, floaters. And then number 24, increased sensitivity to, and this I think was tricky because there's no obvious synonym. It's expressed very differently. If we look at the tape script, and you can see the patient says, I'm much more troubled by glare than I used to be. So it's a very loose synonym. It's expressed in a very different way. Increased sensitivity, I'm much more troubled. It's not an obvious link, so you've really, really got to focus. You've really got to concentrate to get the answer. And the answer was glare as well. Okay, so again, you can see because it has the word to, it's probably going to be an infinitive verb as well. And again, that could help you as well. You know you're listening out for a verb. Or here, glare could also be a noun, in fact. Okay. We're going to move on. So that was really, really difficult. The second extract, I think it was a little bit more tricky because the answers weren't always as obvious as in the first extract. And sometimes they were moving around the audio. So you had the word after the gap, but you would hear it first before the actual answer. And it was a little bit tricky, and you can see how synonyms and synonymous language was really important. But vocabulary is really important. And I think you've got to remember that the OET is a language exam. It's not a medical exam. And the more language you have, the better it is. So let's have a quick look at vocabulary. We talked about collocations earlier. Okay. And we talked about, well, we didn't talk about headaches, but again, it's worth building up language as well. There's lots of different types of headaches. We kind of do this in medical English. And these are what collocations are. They're words that go together. A very common collocation, adjective and noun. You can see we've got 3 different types of adjective to describe a headache. And there's many more as well. But these are common ones, just words that people might say. But there are many more. And also make. This is just generally a collocation, just to really show you what collocations are, because you can make a noise, make a mistake, you can make breakfast. So you wouldn't use the verb do, you don't do a mistake or do noise, or, well, you could do breakfast, I guess, potentially, but it has a different meaning. Commonly, really, so you would make breakfast. So these are just verbs and nouns that go together. Here are some adjectives and prepositions. With worry, and the preposition that commonly goes with worry, you worry about something. Another adjective, it's typical of someone or something. Surprised can take different prepositions, in fact. Surprised at something, or by, or about. You could even say with, actually, as well. Okay, so collocations are really useful. Do a quick task, just a minute, and what you've got to do, you've got to complete the collocations here. You might remember the words with pain and with cough, but we've also got undergo, and you've got words that go with medication. These are all verbs, and then adjectives that go with sensation as well. We did have a look at some. Guys, you've only got a minute, then the clock is ticking. Okay, see how you did. If you managed to complete that, 1 minute isn't a lot of time. Done really well. Just go through them. You can see with cough, I've put chesty, persistent smokers. There are different possible collocations. This is what we had earlier. With medication, you can cease medication, prescribe, change, commence, or recommence medication. And there are different verbs as well you can have with medication. So these are just some kind of common verbs that go with medication. With sensation, the adjectives we had, bloating, burning, and numbing. And of course, there are different adjectives, so you might have some different answers, and that's fine. With pain, lots of different words: a constant pain, a nagging pain, crushing, got a dull, excruciating. Different ways to describe different types of pain. And again, you might have different answers, and that's perfectly fine, because there are lots of adjectives that go with pain. With undergo, we've got tests. You can undergo tests, undergo treatment, undergo therapy as well. Okay, some useful collocations there. Here we've got verbs and nouns. You're going to match here. You can see the table, and you can see at the top you've got some verbs. This is a little bit tricky because there's overlap. You could have actually more than one answer. If you look at the first row, it says a cold and pneumonia. Well, you can't really have an attack of a cold or have an attack of pneumonia. More commonly, I'm sure you know, really you catch a cold or you can catch pneumonia. So that's what you've got to do, guys. The clock is ticking, and you just need to match these verbs with these nouns. Okay, it's a bit tricky. Let's have a look at the answers. So we said to catch a cold, contract a disease. You can contract malaria or typhoid. I think be careful with the pronunciation. It's not contract. The stress actually falls on the second syllable, and we say contract. So be careful with the pronunciation. But commonly, yeah, you can contract malaria or typhoid. And with cancer, well, diabetes commonly can develop these types of illnesses. Suffer from asthma, hay fever, suffer from backache, and then have an attack of. You can commonly say you have an asthma attack. That's quite common. You can also have an attack of bronchitis or diarrhea. And with injuries as well, head injuries, you sustain head injuries. There is overlap here as well, though, guys. So it is slightly tricky. Okay, so we've got some verbs that went with nouns there. So different types of collocations. And we're going to do one more task now. This time you've got to write the word for the collocation. You'll read the sentence, then you've got 10 seconds to write down the collocation. So you'll see what I mean here. For example, number 1, it says flu is not a something illness for most people. It can be for elderly people who are weak and who haven't been vaccinated. Okay, so think about a word that collocates, that goes with illness. Probably it's going to be an adjective. Got 10 seconds, guys, just to write down your word. Okay, let's have a look at question 2. Patients who are something ill often prefer to die at home surrounded by their loved ones. Okay, you've got 10 seconds. Number 3, I'm not in pain. It's just a something ache in my back tooth. I hate going to the dentist. 10 seconds. Number 4, the children have a something diet with lots of fruit and vegetables and only a few sweet things now and then. 10 seconds. Number 5, I need to adopt a proper fitness program and to get into something again. 10 seconds. Number 6, diseases which are something now will be beaten one day if scientists continue to make progress with drugs and genetic science. 10 seconds. Number 7, my doctor prescribed me a new drug to something my backache. Okay, so let's see how you did. With number 1, it was a word that goes with illness, but it's not a serious illness. So flu is not a serious illness. We look at the context of the sentence really to give us the answer. But that's the collocation. You can have a serious illness, an adjective, serious, an illness, noun. So different types of illness. Here we had a serious illness. Patients who are, this word was terminally ill. Okay, number 3, a word that goes with ache. It says, I'm not in pain. So we're not looking for a strong word to describe pain. You could say mild ache or possibly a dull ache. You may have different answers, so feel free to type anything into the chat as well. But I think mild and dull will probably be the most common answers here. Number 4, the children have a something diet, lots of fruit and vegetables. So healthy, a healthy diet. You can see that adjective and noun collocation. I need to adopt a proper fitness program and get into, it sounds like a kind of phrasal verb almost, to get into something, to get into shape. So to become fit again, get into shape. And number 6, diseases which are, this is fairly difficult actually, diseases which are something now. So there's diseases which are prevalent, which are, you know, everyone has. Common was the word I was trying to get, common, a commonplace, you could say. Then here, question 7, a word to describe backache, a drug for backache. But to get rid of your backache, the answer was relieve. So a drug can relieve pain, a useful word to have. So to relieve. Okay, a lot of vocabulary. We're going to do one more task. And let's go back to the listening that we just had. We did 2 extracts. We've got some words here. You might remember, in fact, these words from the listening. What you've got to do is write down the collocation. So first of all, you can see here at the top to kick off. This came in the first listening, and we said it's quite an informal word. This is what the patient said. And you just need to write down a collocation. You could say to begin with or to start, to commence. In fact, any of those words would be good. Number 2, all in all. Okay, guys, think of a synonym. There are different possible answers. You've got a minute just to write down the synonyms. Okay. So how did you do? Again, feel free to type anything into the chat, any questions you may have, or your answers. All in all, I put overall. Again, you might have a different answer, that's fine. There are different possibilities. But all in all, basically overall, you might have written generally, it's possible. Physical graft, we had this word as well, meaning hard work. It took it out of me. In other words, I was exhausted. You might have written fatigued or tired, extremely tired, that's fine. Took some getting used to. In other words, you become familiar with something. Took time to become familiar with something. As well as the word also, we had on the question paper, was also, the patient said as well as, or possibly the other way around. Down to, because of. Yeah, an interesting expression here, down to something. Well, it was because of something. Something's out of the question, it's impossible. Opacity and the word clouding, or you could have written shading as well. So lots of vocabulary, and you can see how vocabulary can really help you with listening part A. In fact, with the whole OET paper, with the reading as well, not just the listening, but the more vocabulary you have, the more it can really help you. So just to really recap and to go over a couple of points, as you do the listening, as you do part A, just make sure you write as you listen. And keep your answers short. Remember, you're not writing full sentences, you're just writing notes. So you shouldn't be writing too long. Often it's 3 or 4 words, sometimes it's 1 word, it might be 2 words, but certainly not whole sentences. Sometimes you might have to write a number as well, but your answers are always short. Remember that spelling, as long as it doesn't change the pronunciation of the word, it's fine to make a spelling mistake. But be careful, because they are very strict. So be careful with spelling. And if you don't know the word and you hear the word, just write down what you can hear. Okay, use words around the gaps as well. We've talked about that as well. Words both before and after the gaps that can really help you. Once you hear a word or the synonym, you know the answer is coming. So really pay attention to the words before and after the gaps as well. Try and put those 30 seconds to good use. Like I said, those 30 seconds, they're there for a reason. They give you those for a reason. So try to put those to good use. I know it's not a lot of time, but as you practice, you will get faster and faster. We've talked about synonymous language. Remember, you have quite formal medical notes. The patient is going to be speaking more informally as well, so you need to be aware of the different language. You've got medical notes, and then you've just got a patient using everyday English. And we've seen with vocabulary how informal the language is as well. Okay, and important to keep listening. You only get one chance, so don't stop listening. As I said previously, if you miss a question, just let it go. But don't stop listening, because once you stop listening, it's really hard to pick up the audio again. So do keep listening. So guys, here at WLES in West London English School, we do a whole load of OET courses that could help you. If you do need support with listening, there is a listening course we do where you have video lessons, you watch the lessons. At the end of the lessons, there are 6 practice tests for you with feedback. And we also do stuff with reading as well. There are reading courses. If you need help with speaking, if you need help with writing, in fact, everything is there. Just check it out, WLES.net. There's a whole load of online and face-to-face courses as well. This is the writing service as well. There's a writing course. If you don't want to do the writing course, you can just do the writing correction service. It's where we send you case notes, you send us your letter, and then we send you back detailed feedback of your letter. So it's been quite popular. Often with writing, it does take 3 or 4 letters before you start to really understand what the examiners are looking for and the style of writing and what you need to do. But check it out, WLES.net. There's a whole load of stuff there as well. There's packages as well. We're actually reworking our online packages at the moment, but check it out at the moment if you're interested. We've got stuff for nurses, for doctors. There is stuff there for pharmacists as well. And of course, we're doing face-to-face classes. If you are here in London, please do come in and see us. We're open, we're running classes. We're about to start the next 4-week course on Monday in preparation, I think, for the July 28th exam. But also we're doing intensive courses as well. There's private lessons, there's all sorts of things. So if you're here in London, please just, give us a call, drop us an email, or if you want to just pop in, come in, and we're more than happy to talk about OET. This is the team. You can see me on the left. In the middle is Beth. Some of you have done lessons with Beth. Beth will be with you next week, in fact. And on the right is Catalin as well. Some of you have started to work with Catalin, which is great. Catalin, she's been with us a long time. She was an interlocutor actually here in London. And she's been involved with OET for a long time as well. So hopefully you'll get a chance to meet Catalin as well at some point. So guys, that's it. WLES.net. Check it out. Check us out. Check us out on YouTube as well. And like I said, if you're here in London, then please do come in and see us. And if you are taking your OET exam, we wish you all the best. Really hope you do get through. And I will see you in a couple of weeks. Take care, guys. It's been lovely working with you, and all the best. Look after yourself. Stay well and stay safe.